This is going to be another really quick, brief, short, speedy video, just giving my inputs on the debate surrounding indie game prices on Steam. So over the past many years, I guess, you may have noticed that there are many great indie games on Steam that are priced extremely low. And then you'll notice that there are many AAA games that are priced extremely high. It doesn't really matter if something's AAA versus indie in terms of like the fun factor. There's some great indie games out there that most people would, I'm sure, say are much better than most AAA games. So it doesn't really matter if you're making a AAA game or an indie game. They both have potential for great time investment and a lot of fun to come out of them. Yet indie games are priced so low. Part of that is due to the number of employees that need to be employed at companies and paying their workers back for their efforts and all of that. And whereas an indie game doesn't really need to incur those costs. And there are other reasons too for the price discrepancy. But this video is just going to focus on my one little perspective on this issue and kind of the most convincing one for me personally as to why I think you should price your indie game higher than you might initially think to price it. There are many reasons for this, but again, I'm just going to list off one here. So I recently moved to Iowa in the United States. I'm originally from Illinois and I've lived in many different areas throughout my life. Today for lunch, I went to Quiznos, which I thought only existed in the past, but apparently they're still around. And I got a simple chicken carbonara sub. It was a foot long and it costed about $12. There wasn't a bunch of chicken or really a bunch of anything on it. It was pretty saucy. It was perfectly toasted. I definitely recommend it if you're going to Quiznos. Get the chicken carbonara. It's a great sandwich. The problem is that it was $12, which is overpriced for something like that. And all that sandwich really provided me with was about 5 to 10 minutes of temporary mouth pleasure and about 3 to 4 hours of stomach hunger satisfaction. Then if you look at some of these indie games being created, you have games like Necess, Undertale, VVVVVV, and they're all usually priced around $10, maybe $15, and usually even under $10. And some of these games are just absolute legends. You get potentially hundreds of hours of playtime. The indie developers potentially pour their sweat, blood, and tears into these games for, 6 months to a year or whatever their timeline is. And then they only put them on the Steam store for less than $10 or around $10. Now, if you take the comparison between the value provided by these games and the potentially hundreds of hours that you get out of them versus the value provided by a single Quiznos sandwich that lasts for about 3 to 4 hours and it costs more than these games, that's a pretty in-your-face wake-up call as to how low-priced these games are. And if a game does price itself above something like $15 and it isn't extremely high quality with a lot of playtime available, then you'll often see negative reviews on Steam of the price just being too high. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, especially nowadays with cost of living rising in the United States and elsewhere around the world, indie game prices in particular have not been catching up with that inflation. And I'm not saying I'm hoping for indie games to go along with inflation, but what I am saying is that I think these indie developers are pricing their games too low and creating an expectation, a kind of standard for consumers to expect a certain price range for these excellent games. If more indie developers would sell their games more expensive, then it would create a new standard and the expectations for what a game should cost would be higher. It's very strange in retrospect to think that when we stop to buy games, we wonder if something's too expensive or if we're paying too much for a $10 game, where when an hour ago we just went out and bought a Quiznos sandwich for $12 and didn't think anything of it. The comparison with purchasing other things in life that don't provide nearly the same satisfaction or value really wins the argument for me personally on raising the prices of indie games. So let me know what you think in the comments. I'm pretty interested in this debate, and thank you so much for watching.